Hello and welcome back to Game Chat. We've been away a little bit. We've been on a hiatus, but we are back. And we're back with, hold on. First of all, we got Ali here. Shout out, Ali.
Yo! How's everyone doing?
Mm-hmm. And then we have somebody new here today. We got our friend, longtime friend. We've talked about him before. The comedian, aka Michael, aka Mike.
What's up, guys?
He's a little.
It's good to be back in the swing of things with you guys.
And it's good to have you. We're so excited. To have you. We're gonna get the train rolling again, and I think we've been friends a long time. One thing that we've been bonded over is comics. We all love comics. The three of us here, big comic fans. And we've even been to, first of all, Elite, we'll go down the line. We'll start with Elite. Elite, what's your favorite comic from Marvel and DC? Not specific issue, but like a team, maybe a character.
So my all-time favorite comic of all time in the Marvel world would definitely have to be the X-Men. It's gonna fall into either Wolverine or Nightcrawler. Also kind of a big Colossus fan. So I would originally kind of sit and say probably my field of expertise would be the original Uncanny X-Men.
All right.
And then for DC world, I kind of would put it into, of course, Batman, but then I'm heavily into what I would like to call like independent, like Alan Moore's, like V for Vendettas, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen's, Watchmen. I mean, that was a DC, but a lot of that more independent world, like Image Comics and, that kind of world is really kind of where I think my expertise lies in.
All right. Mm-hmm. Mike, what about you?
Well, so on the DC side, you already know what the answer is. Watchmen. It's my favorite, probably my favorite and most read book on the DC side. Now, for Marvel, I don't know if I've actually ever told y'all this, but I think it actually is the first comic book I ever read was the original Ultimate Spider-Man. I read that, or I picked that comic book up probably when it was in elementary school, probably like third grade. So I don't know how old I was then, but yeah, that was like my like intro into comic books right there. So I have a soft spot for that Ultimate Spider-Man.
Just so you know too, as Mike got the nickname the Comedian.
Yeah.
Comes directly out of the Watchmen. Mm-hmm. So
that, and I owe all of that to Elite here because that was like the first book that you recommended me read, and I got that deluxe hardcover version of Watchmen, and I read through all of it instantly.
It's a great book.
Yeah, but that's all on Elite right there. So,
shout out for me. I mean, some of the best Marvel comics have been, of course, from the X-Men. I mean, X-Men are so underrated, especially now. I mean, one thing I've always loved about the X-Men is like how like the story can also double as like we're tying into real life events, like how the X-Men like also plays on like segregation. Like people don't want X-Men. We want the X-Men out of here. We don't want X-Men in our we don't want mutants in our schools. And so that's what I've always loved about it, is like it's more an underlining tone. And then that Magneto is a survivor, a Holocaust survivor. Right. It just plays into more real events. So X-Men, of course. And then DC, I mean, got to give it to the Bat.
You got to give it to Batman.
Hush. I mean, we talked about that. I mean, that's
Killing Joke.
Ugh.
Again, I mean, it's funny as we were just talking about this. Is I've been spoiled with wealth. Before we recorded, me and Mike were talking about upcoming Comic Cons and Boston, the Fan Expo. Frank Miller's going to be there, and I'm like, oh, I've already met Frank Miller, and I'm kind of like, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm like, I've already met Frank Miller. It's kind of like saying, oh, I've already met Todd McFarlane, or I've already met, Alan Moore. I mean, he's a freaking legend, and
Yeah.
I personally, Frank Miller saved the DC franchise, when with the whole Batman, his version of Batman and it just blows my mind that I kind of blew that off of like, oh yeah, Frank Miller. And plus he also did a lot of other great books too. Frank Miller was involved with Sin City. There's a lot of great books that he did. So which is another great comic that if you ever go down that rabbit hole, it's funny is I kind of comic books and me are kind of like a love-hate relationship. As I kind of always love to say it is I don't know how many comic books I own. It's literally, that sounds horrible, but I don't know how many I own. But I go away from them, but they always seem to bring me back in. So I'm getting really heavily back into it. And I just started doing this thing now with comics is I'm going to convert all my mini series over to omnibuses. So I just recently got the new Mutant Massacre, and I'm picking up Fall of the Mutants. And I think I'm going to retire single issues and just go to this whole like books, just because they take up less space. But it's kind of funny how that kind of brings you always back into them as like a comfort zone. What were you going to say, Bruce?
You said omnibus. For those who don't know, for the audio listeners who don't know, or people watching, what's an omnibus?
Omnibus is like an oversized 13, 14-inch hardcover book. And what they did is, like, for example, the Mutant Massacre was made up of 41 individual comic books. They took all 41 comic books and put it in one storybook. So I can go to one place, pull out the thing, and read it in order how I was supposed to read them. So it starts out with like X-Men 210, and you start reading about the Mutant Massacre. Then you might have to go to Power Pack 27, and then you go over to, X Factor 5, whatever. And here it does it all for you, but you still have the whole story, cover art, and everything in a really nice hardcover book. And I just like them because, again, I'm a little bit, obsessive compulsive. They're all the exact same size. And the one thing that they kind of did really cool is sometimes you'll see graphic novels like paperbacks, and they might be a little bit taller than another one. Like the Watchmen, for example, is a little bit shorter than A Long Halloween. And it drives me nuts when it sits on my bookcase. But where the omnibus, they're all the same size. And they're all the same size if it's Marvel, X-Men, or Independence. They're all still the same size. So I can literally put a DC right next to a Marvel, and it's still the exact same size. So for me, being OC, a little bit of obsessive compulsive, I kind of like that. So it is what it is. But that's kind of interesting. I'm actually going tomorrow. I'm supposed to go to a comic book convention over in New Hampshire. They're saying they're going to have over 20,000 tables there. So I think I'm just going to go look and just kind of look for some books and stuff. But I don't think they're going to have anybody of worth, like artists or anything. But what's funny is I went to one of them years ago in the 80s, and I met the guy who was the author, and I also met the inker for the Tick at the local one in New Hampshire, because they're out of New Hampshire. And that's where I met Kevin Eastman and Peter Lard, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I've also met them at a local one because they were out of Maine. So it'd be interesting just to kind of sit and see. You never know. And that's kind of the cool thing too, is like you might go see some independent comic. Literally, I got the Tick, and I got those comics probably about 6 months to a year before that TV show came out, the cartoon came out.
Yeah.
And then they blew up. Like everybody knew who they was. But when I had them, they were like a New England Comics first run. Nobody even knew who the hell they were. And they were originally done in black and white, which was kind of cool. So I kind of think that's kind of cool too, is to kind of find that next possible story that nobody knows about. That's kind of, I kind of like knowing about stuff before anybody. I just kind of like, oh, I knew about that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of cool. So we'll see.
Comedian, do you have any Comic-Con stories and comic stories?
A little bit. I have only been to 2 cons or conventions. But probably the coolest people that I have ever met was Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca in Star Wars, and Ray Park, who played Darth Maul.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was kind of bittersweet because I think that was his last, or I think at the end of that year, I believe he did die. So, but I was lucky enough, to get an autograph.
Did Solo come out when you went? Because I know that they got somebody else to fill in for Peter Mayhew.
Yeah, I think Solo came out right before then or whatever. But yeah, he was bound, or he was wheelchair bound when he was there, and just even my dad made a comment to me, saying like, he doesn't look that great, and I was like, yeah, I wasn't sure what to say, but yeah. But yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah, Ray Park. Ray Park. He barely had anybody waiting in line for him. Which kind of, which is, if I were him, I don't know if I'd probably be a little bit irritated. But I mean, he's having to basically compete with Chewbacca. So, but yeah, he seemed like a nice guy. I know that he, he's had that. Whatever went on with him on Instagram, I don't know if y'all familiar with that.
No.
Oh, so
what happened?
The reason why at the end of Solo, they teased Darth Maul, or being involved with whatever that woman's name was, and so Darth Maul was supposed to be a bigger part of the Star Wars story. Like I think with this Obi-Wan show, but then Ray Park got into some sort of feud with his now ex-wife and one of his friends who happened to be or Daniel Logan, who played the young Boba Fett in Episode 2. So Ray Park and him used to be really good friends, and there was some sort of drama between Daniel Logan and his wife. And I also think Ray Park's Instagram got hacked, but there was like a dick pic that got leaked on there.
Oh no!
Yeah, and so
Darth Maul's junk.
big drama with him. And then I believe Disney, they like parted ways with doing things with Ray Park, and that I think that is why you had the teaser at the end of Solo, and he's like, oh, what is Darth Maul going to do? And then that's why you have had nothing about that.
Well, that's how I thought he was going to get a show on Disney Plus. I thought there was supposed to be like a Darth Maul show being made.
I think there was supposed to be one, but then that stuff happened, and so I guess they.
To the story is keep your junk in your pants, boys.
Yeah, I don't know, but they, he and Daniel Logan aren't friends anymore. But that Comic-Con I met him was before all of that. So, but I don't know.
Did you pick up anything cool at Comic-Con?
I did. So I found a booth. I was never able to, or at the time, I didn't have money to like buy graded comics there. At that time, I did find a guy who had a ton of long boxes, and I picked up, I want to say 2 or 3 issues of Watchmen. Then,
Nice.
I remember that.
He was selling them for like, like seven a piece, and they weren't, they're decent copies. They're not, messed up at all. There might be like a crease on the cover, but that's about it. A couple or a few issues of the Watchmen. And I did find someone selling the first issue of the Death in the Family Batman series.
Was it first edition, or was it just, do you know which version it was? How much you paid,
probably no more than 50, but I want to say it was probably a first edition, because
that might be first print. Yeah. Other than episode 3, the third book in that was, you could still get the 1, 2, and 4 fairly inexpensive, but third book was the one where Jason Todd died. So that's the one that's worth so much. But yeah, it's a great series. Great series.
Yeah. That's about it. And that all of that happened my second convention I went to. The first one was my first one, and I was like, still I wasn't sure how everything went there, and so I didn't really do much at that one.
I remember when you went to that, you were all nervous because you're like, "What do I do? What's the best way to do this?"
I'm
like, dude, just get in there, peel the onion back, bro.
Yeah. I took one of my friends, or I took Ben with me.
Yeah,
to that one.
That's who it was, Benny.
Yeah. He had a good time. He got what was it, like Death of Superman? He got that one.
Well, I thought he got Sabrina the Good Witch book or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he got that one. It's like the cover has it's like a pole. There's rubble, and his cape is like torn on it.
Yeah.
He found that one.
That was amazing when it first came out. Like, when that first came out, it came in an all black. Basically, I know had a black S, and it was like a tin, like a aluminum foily kind of cover, and so you couldn't see the real cover of the book. It was really cool. Unfortunately, they made so many of those. Like, I just saw a documentary about that. It's absolutely worth nothing, because they literally made so many of such a significant title that people were going in and buying like 5, 6 comics books at a time. You know what I'm saying? Because they're going to be worth money, and it flooded the market. It's interesting because I come at it from a different perspective. So I started collecting in the 70s. And so technically that was the Silver Age. And, I'm that kid going to a comic book store on the spinner and just like, oh, this is kind of cool, G.I. Joe or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And it's interesting now is looking back of like the late 80s, mid 80s through the 90s. Most of those comics are they're useless because they just made so many of them. Mm-hmm. It's tough, because now, that being said, you'll still find some gems like Watchmen, first edition Watchmen's, because they didn't know that was going to be so successful, or first edition Wolverines, the first runs of Wolverines, the first 5 episodes. And there's a few of them in there, but it was like, it's just so interesting to kind of go back at that. Like, it's kind of funny hearing your story of like, hey, I went and saw Peter Mayhew, and I went and saw, Darth Maul. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, shoot, I can remember going to cons, and there'd just be a little dude sitting over there, and you go over and be like, hey, how you doing? You start talking to him, and Stan Lee.
Yeah.
Because people just weren't interested. Like, it was like, you had to be like a super geek to be going to cons. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, I've been very blessed. The people that I've gotten to meet in my lifetime, like just going to cons and talking to people, and like, I mean, you name it, who's of, you know, Jim Lee, Stan Lee, Frank Miller, Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman. I mean, the names, just laundry list of these amazing names of people that I've gotten to meet at cons. Now, granted, too, I've gotten to go to some big cons, New York and Boston, and you know what I'm saying? So some pretty big cons. But, and it was always amazing, too, like New York Comic Cons, Marvel and DC were right down the road, literally right down the street. So it was like pretty easy for these guys to come in and spend a weekend drawing pictures. You know, the one I really kind of always regretted is I had a chance and I ended up blowing it off. I could have met Bob Kane. And that would have been kind of cool to meet Bob Kane, you know? But so it goes. But it was just kind of amazing to me that I also would have liked to meet the guy who was the artist for trying to think of his name right now. The guy did the X-Men, Spider-Man, and all them with he was Stan Lee's partner for a long time. Steve Ditko and the other guy.
Kirby?
Yeah, Jack Kirby. I think that would have been kind of cool to meet because they came up with classic characters. Like I always would have loved to hear the story of how did you come up with the Thing and just made him rock? Like that to me is like mathematically, it just doesn't make sense. This guy's like walking up on the top of this tower. Why does he fall through the floor? You know? So it's kind of funny. What were you saying, Brunner?
Yeah. I've only been to one like convention, like Comic-Con. I was like a fan. Yeah, Elite knows where this is going. This is a long time ago. Because it was an experience. Because I got invited. My brother, who at the time he was in the Air Force, he's like, "Hey, I got an assignment. They have been working security there, and I got you a free ticket. You know, if you want to come." So I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, I'll come. And we had to get there like before like they opened the doors. Like, so like, and then we had to get there like 6 a.m., 5 a.m. or 6 a.m.
Oh, wow.
Jesus.
And then so like they wouldn't let us in yet. And like, you know, there's just a line slowly forming. But my brother's like, I'm going to go in. But he's like, there's like, you know, you walk around the streets of downtown Salt Lake and, you know, they'll open the doors like in an hour. He's like, I think there's a McDonald's down the street. So I start wandering, you know, downtown Salt Lake. And I never realized this, you know, because, well, I'm not from Salt Lake. I'm from Texas, you know, shout out. But there's apparently a homeless problem in downtown Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And so I'm walking. And I see this, like, you know, the homeless shelter. And then there's this homeless man and he pees on the wall of a building. And I don't mean like the corner or, you know, or like on the sidewalk, literally dead center sprays. And it was cold, still cold too. So like you see, like it was a little steaming out coming. So I'm like, God. And I'm like, I got a bunch of money, you know, in my pocket because I'm fucking going to go spend it at Comic-Con. And like, am I going to get jumped by this homeless dude? And then I see I'm walking, I see this other homeless guy, and he's like sitting on the floor, like back up against the wall, and he's twitching. And he's tweaking. For video listeners, he's literally just going,
oh no.
And so I'm like, what the hell? And then so I wait for, you know, I cross the street, and then I turn around, and the dude just gets up and starts like looking at me at my direction, going like that, just
oh no,
staring at me. I'm like, oh hell no.
And all I wanted was an Egg McMuffin, he says. Jesus.
And then so I'm fucking across the street. And then so I start walking down more. And then I go finally, and then, the crowd starts forming because they're about to open the doors. And that Comic-Con, I don't remember, like, there weren't a bunch of big heavy hitters. The only heavy hitters I remember that were there was like Dave Bautista, because Guardians 2 just came out. Stephen Amell was there, the Green Arrow. He was there. And I think the guy who plays Speedy, whatever, he was there too from Arrow. But there weren't like and like Christopher Lloyd, but I mean there wasn't a huge line for Christopher Lloyd.
And isn't that the Anakin?
No, Doc Brown, Christopher Lloyd.
Doc Brown.
Back to the Future.
Oh, I'm thinking Jake Lloyd. That's my bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants to see Jake Lloyd. No. Jake Lloyd can't even get booked at a Comic-Con.
And so I go in, and they let the doors open. And then so like I meet my brother in there, and he's still working. And then so we want to see like if I could, like, because like if you played for like the premium pass, like you could skip the whole waiting and like go in. Yeah. And so my brother, he asked this guy working there, hefty guy, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm working security. Can you let my brother in? He's right here. He's got his ticket." And then the guy's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I can't let him in."
Okay.
So I'm like, ugh. And so my brother was like, "Well, I'm gonna look for somebody else, see if I can get you in early." And so then he comes back and there's this old man, 80-year-old man working there. He's like, "Hey, can I let my brother in?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." So I go in, and I'm looking for the pictures, but I took some pictures. I just went there specifically to see two people, and that was Sean Schemmel and Christopher Sabat. And you're like, "Well, who's that?" Well, those are the American voice actors for a little indie anime called Dragon Ball.
Oh yeah.
And then so I've watched Dragon Ball since I was a little kid. I've watched the original anime, and then to Z, and then I'm like, and I think they were cheap too. Yeah, they were like $60 for a signature. And then I'm like, I want to do it because I'm like, I grew up with these guys, you know what I mean? Like, I got to see them. Like, literally, I played Dragon Ball almost my whole life. And they have a picture. And I was like waiting in the line. I saw, I don't know if you can see, the fucking green screen is bringing out, but some pyramid head chicks. But I wanted to see.
I always find it funny is when you meet voice actors, because they're nothing at all what you thought they would be. Like, it's like, I remember seeing Tara Strong.
Yeah.
You know who that is, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I don't.
I was like, she plays Starfire on Teen Titans, and she plays like lots of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she also played Raven. She was the voice of Raven too, I think. It was like, what? It's just, and then like the one that blew my mind is the first time I saw Nancy Cartwright.
Oh yeah,
Bart Simpson.
Yeah, Bart.
And I'm like, holy camole. And it's like, she also is the voice of Nelson Muntz, and it's like, it's just, voice actors kind of blow my mind. The other thing that's kind of weird now, it's with cons that I think is kind of interesting, is you have people that are professional cosplay players, and they like have booths, and like people are coming up and getting autographs on people for like cosplay.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm not like, I never really got into the whole cosplay thing. Like I said, I said, if I ever got dressed up for a Comic-Con, if I ever put on a costume, I'm only going to do it one time. It's only going to be at San Diego. If I ever get a chance to go to San Diego, and then I'm just going to do something like like Batman or something. Like, I don't know, something that wouldn't be like super uncomfortable. I'm not going to be like, you know what I'm saying? Some of them are amazing, and do not get me wrong. I'm not like knocking people, but it's just not my scene. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's like, holy camole. I can't believe the courage that some of these people have to walk in some of that stuff. Is like, holy shit. But
yeah. And I saw
crazy.
this. It's so a dude dressed up as Predator, and then there's these people going around, and they're called costume medics. So if you got a piece falling in, if you need glue, or if you need tape, or if you need
Oh
a
my
pin,
God.
they'll help you out. And so
Yeah,
this
it's
dude
like,
dressed as a big alien was getting helped out.
it's kind of weird. Like that kind of, I don't know. Like, I guess I just remember like, this is like Comic-Con to me. Like, I can remember going to cons. You walk into a room and it's like usually like a convention center at the Holiday Inn or something.
Yeah.
And it's just table upon table upon table of long boxes.
Yeah.
And now you're just going to spend the next 12 hours looking through long boxes. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when it became panels and like that whole San Diego thing. So I saw this really cool thing. Originally, the San Diego Comic-Con was called Golden State Comic-Con. And the first con ever in the United States was actually New York City. Okay. And then about 5 years after New York City started doing one, they did the Golden State Comic-Con, which becomes San Diego. And the very first San Diego Comic-Con, there was only 285 people showed up.
Wow.
285 people. Now, that's in the tens of thousands that show up now.
Mm-hmm.
Like every year I put my dang ticket in to try to get a ticket because it's done by lottery, and I'm never pulled. And I'm just waiting for my damn ticket to come up so I can be like, oh, going to San Diego for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but there's also a part of me is like, I think it's like a bucket list thing now. Like, I don't know if I would go to all the panels, and like, I think it'd be kind of cool to be sitting in that audience that very first time when they did that very first Star Wars trailer.
Yeah.
That would have been cool to see. But on the same note, I'm like, you know what? It's going to be on the internet within 2 hours. Do I really need to deal with 20,000 people to go see it? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. But it's on my bucket list, though. It's definitely like my bucket list in the geekdom comic book world of I want to do San Diego Comic-Con. And I think I'll felt it completed.
Now I think the San Diego Comic-Con, I think that's what it's most known for now. Isn't for, like, for the con itself. It's like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what trailer comes out. You know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I definitely want to go there as well.
So when you went to Houston, was it like a big room and like just tons of people selling merch, and then they had like a separate room where you got to meet people?
Basically, it was in, or if you're from Houston, I don't know if anybody listening is from Houston. It's in the George R. Brown Convention Center, which is, you can it's huge. The thing is like, I don't know how big. It's probably several, maybe like 2 or 3 football fields long, and you can rent out, like a section of it. And so it was like this one huge open area, and it was broken down into like quadrants, where like the back area was like your concessions, like, get some food, whatever, restrooms. The left side was where they had all of the comic book artists, writers, stuff where you would get autographs at. And then the entire left side, and like the front, was just, come spend your money, buy some stuff from booths. So it was just this one huge area, but you just had to do a ton of walking like in between.
Right.
But yeah,
but they didn't have like set up, like they didn't have it like. So what I found was like when I go to cons now, it's marketing. Like you'll go and you'll see a booth and they'll be selling like a Funko booth.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I don't give a about that. Like, I don't, I want, where's the long boxes? You know what I'm saying? Where's the comics?
Yeah.
And it's like, I wish they would kind of get back to that as opposed to opening it up to like all this other like Magic the Gathering cards and like
my God.
Pokemon cards and like all that's, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I want to go back just to the old school of the long boxes are just sitting there and digging through your long boxes. You know what I mean?
You just reminded me. There was one booth at the Houston one where they were selling, like you just talked about like the cosplay stuff. There was literally like a section of booths that were selling like props, or not even like I'm not, not like your replicas, whatever, just like your like Halloween costume store, like here's some like dresses and here's some like medieval looking weird, like, I was like, why is this even here?
Well, that's because there's a lot of people that are into comic books. Like I have buddies of mine that are into comics, and then like a bunch of my D&D guys, because I play D&D. A bunch of those guys are also into like Renaissance fairs, which I don't get at all. Like, how can you be into comic books and Renaissance fairs? No. It's like, dude, it's like totally polar opposites. If you think about it, like I'm not running around LARPing with like it's medieval times and then be like, hey, dude, I'm done with this. Let's go read some futuristic friggin' Green Lantern. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it just blows my mind. Like, and it's like, it's just too much crossover. If that makes any sense, it's like let their genre have their genre. Like, be like, hey man, Renaissance fair, costume world. That's your own shit. This is, I don't know.
Well, that was the problem. Is it felt very out of place, and it wasn't even anything good. It wasn't like your, good quality stuff. It was like your, like plastic, rubber.
Yeah.
Like what?
Like I could see like going to a con and them selling those like $400 lightsabers. You know those really high end lightsabers they have?
Yeah.
And I could see that at a con because there's a lot of people that are Star Wars people that go to con. You know what I'm saying? But I just couldn't see. What's so funny is, you know what I'd rather have? I would love to be able to find the crossover, Chewbacca's crossbow.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to own that thing. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah. I saw at mine, like they had like real life swords, like they made Legend of Zelda, the purple sword, and then they had
that'd be cool.
the Thundercats in a real sword. But I'm like,
okay.
But I'm like, how? But I'm like, is that even like? Is it just like good metal? You know what I mean? Can you poke somebody's eyes out, or is it just for show?
Yeah, metal.
Yeah,
metal.
It's good.
There used to be a place in the mall called Cutlery World when I was a kid, and every boy between the ages of like 10 to like 13 thought this place was the coolest thing in the world because on the back wall they sold ninja swords and samurai swords and like Conan the Barbarian swords and stuff. It's just and they're expensive.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a whole nother world too, is like it's funny you were saying earlier about the Watchmen, when you bought those Watchmen loose ends, then now you have that really nice hardcover one. So one of my favorite series of comics ever written was this series called Fallen Angels. It was a Marvel series, and it was supposed to take off, and it was, some of these people were supposed to become the New Mutants, and it just didn't work out, but it was an 8-book series. But it's one of my favorite series. And I actually own 3 copies of the 8. So I got, 8, 8, and 8 3 different times. I actually just took Mike's advice and ordered a new set off of eBay. I've never bought anything in my life off of eBay, and I was happening to find myself at 2 in the morning looking at eBay, and I ordered some comics off of there. I was and they came. And they were pretty decent shape, and it was okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have all 8 episodes framed. I'm going to have it framed in like one big, huge glass frame, and I'm going to put that on my wall, like all the covers. And I was thinking to myself, like, that's more my speed. Like, I would never, ever want to have like a sword. Remember, like, did you ever watch that show? What was that show? Big Bang Theory.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when they walked in the house and there was like the sword from Game of Thrones hanging on the wall?
Mm-hmm.
I would never, ever want that hanging on the wall. Like, I'm just not that kind of person. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, it's like, even like sports memorabilia, I like have a couple things, but I'm not like, oh my God, like, I don't know. I just find that kind of weird. I would much rather have like the artwork of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was saying to you, Mike, about that Spider-Man episode, that issue that I sent you a picture of. And it's like, I would like, to me, I think it'd be so much cooler to have like a nice, huge copy of like the original Batman detective comic or something like that. And then have like maybe even a signed copy of something like that. That would be kind of cool. But I'm also the same way too, like about movie theaters, like movie theater posters.
Oh, yeah.
I like those, you know, but I'm not a big fan of like just weird shit. Like Brunner got these really cool things. I don't know what you call them, but they're like metal. And they're like Spider-Man.
Oh. Are you talking about my Daily Bugle pictures?
Yeah, and they're like metal though.
Yeah. They're like high gloss material, yeah.
And they're pretty cool. And I was like, those are kind of cool.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I love the Watchmen. And I don't know if it's been done with any other book, though. One of the things I did buy, I found out about it a month or two ago. I think it was like a year, or it was like 1987. Right after the Watchmen started releasing, they released a lithograph set. And I bought one sealed on eBay for like $100. But what's in this lithograph set is it has promotional artwork that's like nice cardstock and whatever. You know, they're like,
right.
I don't know, like they're like 18 by 11. They're nice poster size things. But it's got promotional artwork, and it has each of the 12 issues, just the cover artwork. And so I got that, and so getting those framed would be really cool. But I don't know if any other comic has had that before, where it has like.
So those things that you're talking, those are called lobby cards.
Mm-hmm.
Is what those call, those big oversized card stock. They're called lobby cards. And what they used to do back in the day was they would put them out on like little, you know what I mean, like little A-frames, and they used to use them in the front of movie theaters. Like when you used to walk in the lobby of a movie theater, that's what used to be sitting there. And that was so they did that for Watchmen as like a replica, because it was supposed to take place at the time period it took place. And so they did like a lobby card, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I'll send you a picture of it later, but yeah, I found that and I thought that was really cool. But
dude, there's not a time that I go into the comic book store that I don't see a button of the comedian's button. And I'm like, oh, always makes me laugh because I always think of you.
I love it. It's my, or with the exception of like Instagram, it's my like profile picture for like everything.
Gamer pick forever, dude.
Yeah, it's Discord for even on like my Apple, like my Apple ID. I have that set as my picture. It's my Google picture. It's like it's on everything. I love it.
It's a good comic.
Yeah, when I went to when I got in, when they let me in, I was going through some of the comics they had, and I remember one thing that like jumped up, I think probably a little bit ridiculous because at the time was I found a Jessica Jones issue #1. So and the show had just came out at the time, and uh and then but when I met, I just want to say tell about the time I met Goku and Vegeta. So I was standing in the line, and they were both somehow put together. So I'm like, okay, cool. And so the guy was nice, and like I got a picture of him, but I mean I'll put in the edit. But there he is, and then he's Vegeta, and then he's like, oh, hey, thanks for coming out. And then he's like, and he did his little voice thing, whatever. And then he had signed this for me, and it was pretty cool. But when I met, the main character of Dragon Ball, Goku, I'm like, I was freaking out a little bit as I started to inch a little closer because I'm like, this is him. And he was so nice too. Like, I have a picture of it. Like, he came out because, when you go to Comic-Con, there are like tables. He came out of the table and he was standing there and he would like shake everybody's hand and he made eye contact and he was like such a super nice guy. And then like I got there and like my palms are sweaty. I'm like, gosh, and I'm rubbing on my pants. And then I meet him and then he's like, hey, he's like, how are you? I'm like, fine, how are you? He's like, I'm great. He's like, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to meet everybody. And he's like, oh, thank you for coming. And then he signed this for me. And unfortunately, I had moved and those pictures got lost in the move. But I'm like, he was such a nice guy. I'm like, literally my expectations of him were met. I'm like, he's like the nicest guy. I mean, like a lot of people, like like I'm just here, sign this, go ever. All right, next. But he was like such a nice guy. Made the trip, made the experience worth it. And I'm glad I got to meet Goku. I mean, I've been watching this guy since I was like 9-10 years old, and I'm an adult now, and it's crazy.
Yeah. I think it's crazy is how those guys like they basically, I think people that go to cons like to do that and like to meet people, because I've never met somebody that was like kind of like a jerk at a con. I'll tell you a funny story. It didn't happen at a con, but I'll tell you about one of the nicest people I ever met in the comic industry ever. It happened at my local Apple store. Okay. So I was in the Apple store in the main mall, and I happened to be there, and there was this guy, and he was talking, and you know how like the Apple store, you're like right next to each other. I wasn't like trying to listen in, but I recognized him, and then he said something, and I'm like, oh shoot. So his Apple person walks away, and I said, excuse me, are you Lincoln Pierce? He goes, oh, I am. I said, oh my God, my son is a huge fan of yours. I said, he reads your books all the time. Yeah. Do you know who Lincoln Pierce is, Mike?
Who are Lincoln Pierce for the audio listeners? People don't know.
He writes all the Big Nate comic books. Okay. Big Nate. Yeah, it's kind of like a Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yeah.
And now he's doing a TV. Now he's on a TV show. They got Big Nate's on TV. He's got his own TV show. He goes, what's your son's name? I said, his name's Jack. And we start talking. He takes a piece of paper, whips out, hey, Jack.
Oh, wow.
Good luck or something like that. And he draws Big Nate right there. Da, 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 da. He goes, here, give this to your son.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
That's
I was
crazy.
like, that was so cool. And I just think that the art world, when you start to talk about like comic artists and like people in the cartoon or comic world, I think they just appreciate anybody that likes their craft, because there probably was a long period where they were not getting respect. I mean, these people aren't Van Gogh. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
And so it's kind of like they just seem so genuine, and it's like amazing to me.
Well, even today, I think artists, they're like they don't get as much credit as the writers do. And because from what I noticed, well, at least from what I noticed is like going to the conventions that I went to is that the writers had way more people at their tables than the artists did.
Yeah. I think it depends on the artist. Like, I think that if we showed up and all of a sudden there was Todd McFarlane,
Mm-hmm.
or Jim Lee, are like some super heavy hitters.
Yeah, like Joe Quesada.
People would be like, oh my God, that's Todd McFarlane. That's the guy who created Spawn. That's the guy who created Venom. But then I think that you look at it, most people know the stories. And I think that that's why they know the writers, because they know the Frank Millers and Alan Moores and the Neil Gaimans because of the story, as opposed to it's kind of funny. Like, there's this really great, like we were talking earlier about Kevin Smith. And Kevin Smith's a big comic book guy. He did this movie. He made this movie called Chasing Amy. And the whole funny thing is there's this guy in there named Binky Barnes. Was it Binky Barnes? Or Brody, whatever, it doesn't matter. He's played by Jason Lee, the guy from My Name is Earl, plays him. And his job is he's an inker. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the comic book world, the whole time, people are like, dude, you're not even an artist. You just trace, and you're a tracer. And I think it's a situation as they're not even respected in their own industry. Unless you come up with like a Bob Kane or Joel Schumann, or like you come up with an iconic character, Jack Kirby coming up with Wolverine, or I think if you come up with that iconic character, that's what kind of sets you aside. But you got to realize, like, that iconic character, Jack Kirby's been dead for 30 years. They're still drawing Wolverine. So it's literally, when you look at it, I kind of think about it. It's interesting to see that, though. And I think that's kind of why they don't, I don't know. Maybe you're right. They just don't get the love. But that's awesome to hear that Brunner had that experience.
Yeah.
Because they usually say, like, don't meet your heroes, but like that's nice. You actually have a good story about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never heard anybody ever say that it was a mistake meeting Stan Lee.
Yeah.
I've never ever heard anybody ever say that. And I did get to meet one of my heroes, and he was a writer. He's an author, like not a comic book guy, but he was an author of in a different world. That's a whole other story we could talk about a different time. And he was like, wow, this guy's an
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, I think we should end it there. We've talked a lot. Comedian, how was your first time here?
Yeah. Or did you say how?
Yeah, how was your first time?
Oh, how? I didn't hear the how.
Yeah.
No, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm just, this is a new thing for me, so I am trying to loosen up a little bit. But I'm sure, the more practice I get in per se, will, I'll just feel that I could just shoot easier, because this is interesting for me. I like it. But yeah, I will have my camera set up for next time. And so that'll, be better for, I guess, people watching it, or you guys can see my motions in my face. So,
Right. Well, as always, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Take it easy.
Peace.